Hey friendo, Steve here. I know it's been a while since I've done anything here on the Friendo channel. Hopefully that'll change starting with this video. Figured what better time to come back to the channel than to talk about some Marvel Cinematic Universe news. Woo, everybody loves that, right? It's been big news lately in the nerd community, in the Marvel Universe community, about Spider-Man maybe not being part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe anymore. Disney and Sony can't come together from a business perspective to extend their agreement to have Spider-Man, who is owned by Sony, the rights anyways are owned by Sony, to participate in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And of course that has everybody flipping their shit. They're like, oh my God, we gotta have Spider-Man in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And it's justifiable to feel that way. I mean, they're comic books. One of the great things about comic books, going back to Batman and Superman and the world's finest comics, is seeing your favorite heroes mingle with the other favorite heroes. It's been a formula that Marvel has perfected. DC not so much, but they're trying, God bless them. And it's revitalized the Spider-Man franchise. There's a couple things to consider here. I personally kind of think, so I was reading this article on Vox.com. I will link to it in the description. I kind of feel like this whole thing playing out in public is a negotiating tactic, probably from somebody in Disney. Perhaps leaked out that this wasn't happening, basically to get fans all up in arms, to start pointing fingers specifically at Sony, who said, no, we like the deal as it is. Disney, you get like, I think it was 5% of the gross amount, which is what comes in before money is spent. And Disney wants a co-financing stake, which basically means they put half the money in to make the movie and they get half the money of whatever it comes in because of it. So Sony doesn't want to budge on that apparently. They feel maybe that, well, we got what we wanted. Spider-Man is relevant again. We have Tom Holland for 2 more movies. We have the director of the movie for 2 more movies. We've got Amy Pascal, the producer, on for probably however long she wants to be. The only thing that's missing is Kevin Feige and the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe. So could they get along without the Marvel Cinematic Universe? They seem to feel like they probably can. Creatively speaking, it's actually totally possible for them to continue doing the Spider-Man movies without any mention of the Marvel Universe. I mean, you know, Tony Stark, the main link between Spider-Man and the Avengers and the rest of the Marvel Universe, is, spoiler alert, dead. And so, I mean, is there really a reason for him to be mentioned at all? Maybe not. I mean, I know Peter had a relationship with him, but they can get away with that. If they wanted to get really clever with it, like really clever with it, they can sort of hearken to the Spider-Verse movie and just have Tom Holland's Peter Parker shift actual universes out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That would actually be a really interesting story to tell, and I think fans could potentially get on board with that if it's done in a way that's as clever as Into the Spider-Verse, which was like one of my favorite movies of the year. So I think there are definitely creative ways they could go about doing it. It's just they're gonna run into the same problem that they had a couple of years ago, and that's once Tom Holland's contract is up, let's say he wants to move on, they're gonna have to reboot the series. And that's not easy. They tried that already with the Andrew Garfield, and that's what this line of movies, and that's what got them in this place sort of to begin with. So they're going to face a long-term problem if they're not part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. If they stayed in the MCU, they wouldn't really be rebooting. As Marvel does, they sort of phase out their characters either through death or, in Captain America's situation, time travel. You know, there's any number of ways they can phase out Tom Holland, who seems to be very happy in the MCU. He apparently unfollowed Sony Studios' Instagram account as some sort of protest about this. And so, you know, chances are you'll keep him around to play Spider-Man for, you know, maybe the next 10, who knows, maybe 15 years. And then he can pass the torch to a Miles Morales character. And, you know, there's any number of things I think you'd be able to keep moving the franchise along as it stands via, like, you know, torch passing. So I think you've got a lot more longevity in the Marvel Cinematic Universe Whereas Sony, if they just go it alone, they're going to have to reboot probably sooner than later. We're talking about within the next like 5 or 6 years maybe. So they have to know that. You would think they would know that, and you would think that the two sides are probably going to end up agreeing on a new deal, a longer term deal. That wouldn't surprise me at all if we heard about that sooner than later. Marvel, on the other hand, has all the leverage in the world. They have a lot of time on their hands. If you take a look at the slate that was announced at San Diego Comic-Con for Phase 4, there's nothing really there that Spider-Man needs to be a part of. They've got the Eternals, which is more of like a god sort of, they're like sort of superhero gods that Jack Kirby created back in the day. Spider-Man doesn't need to be anywhere near them. They've got a bunch of Disney Plus series with like sort of the Avengers. They've got Falcon and Winter Soldier. Spider-Man doesn't need to be a part of that. Doctor Strange's movie, he doesn't really need to be part of that. Hawkeye show, Spider-Man shouldn't be in that. So there's nothing in Phase 4, like with Infinity War and Endgame and Civil War, Spider-Man was kind of necessary there. Like he was an integral part of all that stuff. It made sense for him to be there. But in this rebuilding phase, it really doesn't make any sense for him to be there. And this rebuilding phase is going to be at least 3 years. They've got Blade after all these movies that are coming out. They've got confirmed they're going to start working on Fantastic Four at some point. And at that point, it might make sense for Spider-Man to be a part of it because Reed Richards, at least in the comic books, is kind of like Tony Stark 2.0 in some respects. I could see maybe Spider-Man being involved in the Fantastic Four. I think people would mark out big time if he did join the Fantastic Four. At one point in the comic books, I think he's been part of I know he's been part of a version of the Fantastic Four, probably a couple times. So there's any number of things they can do with that. But we're talking, that's like 4 years from now. At that point, there might actually already be 2 more Spider-Man movies done, because I think they're going to try to do them every 2 years. And it would make a lot of sense for them to start, as they're building towards whatever their next big, huge event is, their next Infinity War Endgame, which will probably involve the Fantastic Four and Galactus and then the Guardians of the Galaxy or whatever. As they move towards that, they're going to want Spider-Man back. But they have a lot of time to negotiate this stuff. And Sony, by the time they get to the next Spider-Man movie and the next Spider-Man movie, assuming they're out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they might be up Schitt's Creek because Tom Holland might be like, hey, Marvel's doing a bunch of cool stuff over here. I don't really want to be a part of this anymore. You're going to have to reboot. Good luck with that. So that's sort of where it all stands. I kind of think that it's much ado about nothing. I think that there's a lot of money on the table, and these are 2 big conglomerates, and eventually they're going to see eye to eye because it's in everybody's best interest to get this done. And if Spider-Man doesn't end up being in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, there's a number of ways that they can get around that as well. On the Marvel side of things, they can write him off with a sentence or something. I don't know. But anyways, that's my thought. Those are my thoughts on the subject. I got it in under 10 minutes, so that makes me happy. Let us know what you guys think in the comments below. Look, if he ends up out of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, might be a bit on the messy side. I know they were sort of setting some stuff up in the end credit scenes there in Far From Home, but I don't know. I think it's going to be. I think they'll come together eventually. I mean, there's a lot of money at stake here, and nobody wants to lose out on that. Anyways, let me know what you guys think in the comments. Let me know what kind of stuff you want to see here on the Friendoville channel. If you want to help support the channel, go head over to friendoworkshop.com. I've got a store over there with some comic books, some art prints, and I'm looking to get a lot more stuff up over there. If you have any suggestions for that, like if you want stickers or pins or whatever, let me know. What would you buy from Steve here? And until next time, we'll talk to you later.